How's it going, YouTube? My name is Brandon. Welcome to my channel. This is my first ever video, and I am hoping this could become something for me. On here, you're going to be getting a lot of sports talks videos between hockey, baseball, and football. Mostly hockey. I am a huge hockey fan. I am a Rangers fan. So starting off, I feel like the first video I should do is dealing with this year's trade deadline and targets that could be traded from the teams at the bottom of the standings. So right now on my board, I have 11 teams. They are the worst 11 teams in the league right now. I've picked out 2-3 guys from each team. A couple guys are going to be question marks about if they should be traded. And if they are, where are they going to end up? But right now, I just on the board, I have certain targets. Each teams that are contending should go for. I have 2 other lists I'm going to be doing after this one. It's all going to be one video, but it's going to be split up into parts, if that makes sense. So this one is the sellers. The second one is going to be the middle of the pack teams that, if they make a move, are they going to be selling some of their players, or are they going to make a move to try and make a push for the playoffs? And that list has the teams that are 3 to 5 points out of a playoff spot right now. And then the other one is going to be the teams that are probably making the playoffs and should make a trade to go to the playoffs. And that list will be not who they should acquire, but I'll put in my inputs about who I think they should acquire. So going into this first part of the list, on the board I have Columbus Blue Jackets. I feel like they should trade Gustav Nyquist, Jacob Voracek, and Jonas Korpisalo. The reason I have those 3 on the list, they all have 1 year left on their contracts. Veterans in the league that could be looking to help a team win the Stanley Cup or make a push for the playoffs. The biggest question mark with Columbus, how long are they going to be rebuilding now? Another question for them is, if you're going to be rebuilding for a while and your team's in the bottom of the standings, Patrik Laine could be available too. I know they just acquired Johnny Hockey this offseason, but why, if they're bottom of the league, he's probably questioning that himself. Why do you go there? 31st team in the league, Chicago. Easy, Taze, he's gone. He's been there his entire career. Chicago's going to be rebuilding for a couple more years. He's not going to want to stay through that. If a team does acquire him, Chicago's going to have to take at least half the salary. Could be a situation where you see a 3-team trade where Chicago takes half the salary, another team takes some of the salary, and then that team sends him to the contending team. Same with Patrick Kane. Him, on the other hand, the team that acquires him should also have enough space to re-sign him for multiple years. He should not just be a 1-year rental. He should be a trade for not just now, but 3-4 years. So you can sign him to a 3-4 year extension. And those teams that have that salary cap should go for that. 30th, the Ducks. Defense, they have Klingberg, Shattenkirk, and Kulikov. They all have 1 year left on their contracts. They're going to be shipped out by the deadline. Now, the Ducks have the first big question mark for a tradable asset that they have on the team right now, and that is John Gibson. My question is, he has 5 years left on his contract, first off. Next year, you're not going to be contending. That puts him down to 4 years left. In 2 years from now, do you see yourselves being a contender, or are you still going to be in the middle of the pack? Does he see himself having the chance to get the Ducks to the playoffs in 2 years when there's 3 years left on his contract? If not, now is the perfect time for the Ducks to trade him and get as much assets as you can for him before he starts to decline. He's about to be hitting 30. If not, he is 30 right now. And he has been with the Ducks his entire career. He's only made the playoffs 3-4 seasons, and they haven't even gone out of the first round, if I'm not mistaken. And with Gibson, he might be already talking to the Ducks front office, be like, how long are we rebuilding? I haven't made the playoffs in 3 seasons, and if we have, we've done horrible. I think it's time Gibson leaves Anaheim. And I really think if they trade him now, they can get the most value for him right now. Because then he's going to go to a team that needs a goalie, and after this year, he'll have 4 more years locked up on that contract. And his contract is a decent contract for a goalie of his caliber. Trade him to a team that really needs a goalie, for a long term, and they will be fine. Arizona, their players, Nick Bonino, Nick Ritchie, Shane Goshenspier, they all have 1 year left. They're probably going to trade at the trade deadline. Question mark, are they going to trade Jakob Chichrin too? He should be traded. He has not had the success in Arizona. Arizona has not been successful with him on the team. They've made the playoffs once in the past 5-6 seasons, if that, I think. I think the last time that they made the playoffs was during the lockout, or not lockout, but the 2020 year of COVID when extra teams made the playoffs. So with Chichrin, if he is traded, he has 3 years left on his contract. So next year, that's a 2-year contract left. That's a prime time for him to be traded to. Teams that are looking for that 2-year contract for a defenseman to push them to the next step. And with him, he should be traded. You got the Sharks. I have Nick Bonino that should be traded. James Reimer. Another question mark, Timo Meier. 1 year left on the contract. He is going to be hitting free agency. If the Sharks don't trade him, I don't see them having the cap space to be able to bring him back. So with that, they should trade him now. This team is rebuilding. They're going to be rebuilding for a couple more years. They just got rid of Brent Burns previous season, going into this year, I should say. He has helped Carolina really well, but Timo Meier should be traded from the Sharks. He's young, but how long is the Sharks going to be rebuilding? I feel like they're going to be stuck in this position for another 2-3 years. That's going to put him at 27, 28, 29 years old, if I'm not mistaken for his age right now, at being 24 or 25. Does he want to be on a team at the bottom of the standings waiting to get good? With him, I think he should be traded. Vancouver, big question mark. Is Bo Hever going to be traded? Their captain, if he is traded, they better get a haul because he is an amazing player just on a very bad Vancouver team right now. Even if he was just re-signed, JT Miller, that 8-year contract, that was a very iffy signing by Vancouver last season before the trade deadline last year when he should have been traded. If he is traded, a team's going to have to make sure they have enough cap space for future years to take that on. If not, you might see him deteriorate and slowly lose value in Vancouver. His value was at an all-time high last trade deadline. They are 1 year too late to trade him, and now they might be stuck in a situation where they have to keep him for 7 more seasons. And then a question mark that I have with them, Thatcher Demko, same situation I have with Gibson. He has 4 years left on his contract. Vancouver's going to be in this rebuild for a couple more years, I feel. They don't have the prospects. They don't have the talent on the roster right now to push for the playoffs next season, as they're one of the worst teams in the league right now. They just got rid of Bruce Boudreau and brought in a new coach, Rick Tichet, I think it is. And to me, they should have just kept Bruce Boudreau to the end of the season. Vancouver is in all sorts of shambles right now, and what they need is a stable management before they fix the hockey roster, because a lot of the issues are on the upper management, and that's just my personal opinion. Montreal, first overall pick last year. Everyone knew they were going to be in this spot. They're lower standings right now. They could be a team where you see them be taking on an extra cap hit to help other teams for a trade. They got Dadonov, who's going to be traded. You got Hoffman and Edmondson. They do have 2 years left on their contracts, but I feel like they can be traded. They could at least help a team out. They have not high cap hits, but they could get 2 years where the salary is retained by Montreal. So you really got to think Montreal's taking 1 year on the salary going into next season. This year's salary, it's not going to affect them that much. Next year, they're like 3-4 years before they see the playoffs again. Goaltending is going to be very weak for them. They have Jake Allen, but they are surely missing Carey Price. And if the rumors are true, Carey Price is not going to be playing another game in the NHL ever again. So with Carey Price, he could be a contract where it just sits and it's getting eaten up on the long-term injury reserve. And if it is, he had a great career with Montreal. As a Ranger fan, I believe Carey Price was one of the top 10 goalies in NHL history. Never really got a chance to win that Stanley Cup besides a couple years ago, but they ran into Tampa Bay, the best team in the league within the past 5 years. And with Carey Price, if he does return, it's question mark, is he going to return to his Carey Price self, or if he is going to be realizing he's not going to be at the caliber and just stay on LTIR, long-term injury reserve, or just retire. St. Louis, I have one guy on St. Louis on the board that should be traded, but I have a couple written down that might be traded. Vladimir Tarasenko, 100% should be traded. St. Louis is at the bottom of the standings. Yes, Tarasenko is a great player and still kind of young, but St. Louis should capitalize on the value he has right now and get something back from him. Because if he doesn't want to resign, he's going to go to a team, get $9-10 million a year. Does St. Louis have that in their budget? And to me, no, they don't, because they also have to resign Ryan O'Reilly. He has 1 year left. He's their captain. You're going to have to trade one of them at this trade deadline to get some type of value back. If not, you're going to be regretting that decision when free agents hits, because one of them is not returning. And if both don't return, you guys just lost an opportunity to get a young prospect and a first rounder at the very least for Tarasenko. To me, Tarasenko should get a first round pick and a prospect at the very least. And if you can't get anything from him, you need to be resigning him. And if you're not, and you let him walk in free agency and not get anything from him, St. Louis, you just took a step back another 3 years, in my opinion. Ottawa, they really don't have much to offer for trades, but they have some veterans that could help out teams in the bottom six that need them. Tyler Mott, Derek Brassard, Travis Hamonic on defense, and Cam Talbot in goaltending. There's a few teams that are in the playoff hunt right now that could use a solid backup or that 1A situation. Pittsburgh could use some goaltending. Tristan Jarry and Casey DeSmith, they've been very shaky this season. They could use some goaltending help for sure. You got Detroit. My biggest question with Detroit, where do you see yourselves going into next season? Dylan Larkin's a free agent. I've been seeing people saying Larkin's going to be traded. He doesn't want to stay in Detroit. But if that's the case, I can see why he hasn't resigned yet. But then again, Stevie Yzerman is one of the best GMs in the league. He built Tampa Bay from the ground up. He got Stamkos on the contract he's on right now. And to me, I think Detroit's waiting till the end of the season to re-sign Larkin. But if they are in the situation where they want to trade him, this is his going into his last year on the team. He's a great player, and teams would be calling left and right if they find out that Dylan Larkin is available for a trade. They'd be giving up a ransom for him, but I think Detroit should keep him. Now, they should definitely trade Ali Mata, though. 1 year left defenseman, and goalie in the minors who should be on the team, Nedeljkovic. Carolina let him walk and then went to Detroit, and Detroit has him in their minors right now. And to me, he deserves to go to a team that could really use a goaltending help. And again, Pittsburgh is one team that I can think of out of a lot of the contenders right now that need goaltending. And Nedeljkovic is young enough to take that next step and become the starter for the next team that he goes to. And to me, he should be starting in Detroit. He should be the goalie that they're rolling with, but he's not at the moment. And to me, that shows that Detroit's probably going to trade him at the trade deadline. And then the 11th team I have on the board is the Philadelphia Flyers. Very bad last year. This year, they've been up and down. But right now, they should be looking to rebuild. And three guys that they should trade: James Van Riemsdyk, Justin Braun, and Kevin Hayes. Kevin Hayes does have term on his contract, so if they trade him, he's got to go to a team that can acquire that cap space or cap hit. If not, that's another situation where Flyers spent $6 million a year on him for very bad production. And to me, a couple years ago when Flyers signed him, I said it to my friends, that was a horrible signing by the Flyers. And right now, they are regretting it. And right now, that is my first 11 teams I have on this board. I'm going to end the video here, but add a second part to it right after. So it's going to be one big video separated by 3 parts. The next one is going to be the teams that I believe are in the middle of the pack, that if they are going to make a trade, should they trade or should they keep what they have? See you in the next part. Alrighty, here is the second portion of the video. This is the teams that I believe are in the middle of the pack. I only got 5 teams on the board because the rest of the teams I believe are true contenders for the playoffs. Yes, some of these teams are 3 points out, like I said, but they've been very shaky all season. And to me, a couple of these teams should sell at the deadline. Personally, Panthers should definitely sell at the deadline. They are not getting into the playoffs. If they do, it's going to be a wild card spot. But there are 2 other teams in the East that are ahead of them for a wild card spot, shockingly, the Buffalo Sabres and the Islanders. And I believe the Islanders are a better team than the Panthers this season. Last season, the Panthers won the President's Trophy, and then this season, they took a huge step back. So to me, one player they should look to trade to really help the team for next year, even if they can't get much for him, is Sergei Bobrovsky. They need cap space for next season. They are very, very close to the cap. And if they can't get rid of Bobrovsky, you are now going to be rolling with Spencer Knight, who should be their starter next season, and Bobrovsky. And Bobrovsky took a huge step back this season. He's been injured. He's been very shaky in goal. He hasn't been reliable like the normal Sergei Bobrovsky we've seen in the past. So if there's a team that can acquire his almost $9 million cap hit, they should find a way to trade him. If not, during the offseason, you might have to buy him out. But I do not see Sergei Bobrovsky returning to the Florida Panthers going into next season. I have Nashville on the list. They are 3 points out. In the West, they couldn't squeeze and make the playoffs. If they trade and pick up one of the veterans from my previous portion of the video, they could squeeze in the playoffs. But if they don't, the biggest player they should trade, who they just acquired this offseason, Ryan McDonagh. He's got a decent cap hit for a team that really needs a defenseman, and he is still a solid defenseman. And right now, he has not really produced much in Nashville. He hasn't been that same defenseman he was with Tampa Bay or the Rangers, at that matter. And to me, Ryan McDonagh should be traded from Nashville to a team that's more of a contender. Got the Islanders. They're 2 points out. They possibly could squeak in, depending on how good the Penguins or the Capitals do, because they are right ahead of them in the standings. But if the Islanders feel like they can't make the playoffs, they should probably make a couple trades. And 2 players they should trade is Josh Bailey and Semyon Varlamov. Again, Varlamov, a goalie. There are teams that need goalies going towards the playoffs. And the Islanders have a goalie with 1 year left. They can take on his cap hit and trade him to a team that needs a goalie. And at the very bottom of the board, I forgot to say this before, after the All-Star break, which starts in about 4 days, there's going to be 25 days until the trade deadline. Right now, there's about 33 days until the trade deadline. The trade deadline is March 3rd. So, to me, teams should be looking at what they need to fix right now. They shouldn't be looking at it a week before the deadline. They should be making the phone calls now, feeling out the trade market before it's too late. Because there could be several teams calling the Islanders about Varlamov, and the Islanders could be like, oh, we don't want to trade him now. This is where the Islanders should make the determination. Do they want to keep him for the rest of the season or not? And to me, they should just trade him. You got Ilya Sorokin, who is an amazing young goalie in the league. He's been putting on a show with the Islanders past 2 years. And to me, they should roll with Sorokin, 100%. Varlamov should be traded 100%. And if the Islanders don't trade Varlamov, it's the same situation that I said with St. Louis. They're going to regret not trading him. He is assets that can help this team for the future. As much as I want to say as a Ranger fan, I don't want to see them succeeding, the NHL is better when the Islanders and Rangers are both succeeding and fighting for playoffs against each other. Those games head-to-head at the Garden and at the Islanders' new arena, those fan bases go insane. And if playoffs are on the line, you know for a fact those fans are going to be twice as crazy. And the Islanders should be pushing for a playoff spot. And the best way of doing that is trading Varlamov, getting either picks or better assets to push them towards the playoffs. They're not that far behind the Penguins. And the Penguins have been very shaky this season. And if they don't make the playoffs, it's going to be one of the first times I've ever seen Crosby and the Penguins not make the playoffs. I think it's only happened one other time. Wild card on this team, the Buffalo Sabres. They have really surprised a lot of teams in the league. They are 1 point out of a playoff spot for the wild card. They're not getting a divisional spot. 100% they're not getting a divisional. You got Boston, who has been dominating the league. You got Toronto. Well, that wasn't supposed to happen. I will fix that. And you also got Tampa Bay. Buffalo's not catching any of those teams. But who they could catch, Pittsburgh, Washington. Buffalo has been a very surprising team. To me, Buffalo, they should be a buyer. But if they determine that they can't make the playoffs, one player they should trade is Kyle Okposo. He's like one of their only guys left on the team that has a 1-year contract. You can get some type of value for it. But a crazy trade I think Buffalo should call about, and they have the cap space to do it, Chicago. They should call to get Patrick Kane. Hometown Buffalo kid. Buffalo could really, really use Patrick Kane as their superstar. Pair him on a line with Tage Thompson. Buffalo could really sneak into the playoffs with Patrick Kane. And if Kane doesn't go to Buffalo, he might be traded to Boston. If you can find two other teams or another team to take on half his salary, if Chicago takes on half of it, and let's say they trade him to Arizona, who takes on half his salary, that could work to the point where Boston can get Patrick Kane for whatever they offer him. If Boston wants to really push for the playoffs, which I think they are the favorites to win the cup right now, I can't see a team stopping them if they bring in Patrick Kane. And to me, Kane would really, really help any team of these teams on the board to push for the playoffs. But the team that I think could make that trade is Buffalo. And in my next part of the video, I'll go through with the other teams in the league and not fully figure out who I think could go to those teams, but throw some names out for certain teams. And last team on the board I have is Calgary. Right now they're tied in the standings with Colorado. Calgary has not been the same team that they have like the word last season. Same with Florida. When those teams made the trade in the offseason, it made no sense to me. Both teams were so good last year. So why were you breaking what was not broken? So to me, Calgary, if they make the playoffs, it's either going to be Colorado, Calgary making the playoffs. Both those teams are not making the playoffs. And if Calgary doesn't make it and they realize they should sell, Milan Lucic should be traded. He's one of the only ones on the team that has that 1-year contract. And I feel like he can make a difference for a team that's looking for a bottom 6 pairing on their forward group that can add grit, that can add that veteran experience to a team that could use a playoff push. And in my third and final part to this video, I'm going to put on the board the other teams that are contending for the playoffs, but I'm not going to put every team on there. I'm going to put probably 5 or 6 and write down trade targets. I'm going to choose the teams that need to make a move more than others. There are certain teams that don't need to make a move at all. There are certain teams that could probably only use 1 or 2 spots, and there's certain teams that have been surprising and shouldn't make a trade because what's the point? They're already doing better than what they were expected. Alrighty, here's the third and final part to this video. and now I have the teams that are contenders for the playoffs. I did decide to write down every single team that's contending and just put a quick note of what they could use at the trade deadline. Boston, all they need is depth. They don't need to make a big splash, but like I said, if they can make the swing, even for 1 year for Patrick Kane, just for this year, I feel like they could be a team that could just use him for 1 year. But they don't need to make a trade. But if they do, they just get depth in case of injuries in the playoffs, because injuries happen all the time, and we've seen in the past where a team loses a key player in the playoffs and then they derail completely. Carolina, bottom 6 goal scoring. They've been the second best team in the East since halfway through November after New Jersey took their cool down. Carolina's been the second best team in the East, and they're not catching Boston for the President's Trophy. Boston has that locked up. Unless they drop dramatically within the past month and a half, 2 months of the season, Boston's got the President's Trophy. So Carolina, bottom 6 goal scoring. You just want to compete, stay healthy, get to the playoffs, and see where it goes from there. Toronto, they need some help on defense, 100%. They've had a strong forward group's goal scoring, but they need help on defense. You can't have 4-year defenders putting up points and then not having a defender to shut down. Also, they need to find a way to make sure Tavares continues scoring goals and is not on the ice when goals are scored against, because that's been one of his biggest issues this season. Is he's had a horrible plus minus. He's at a plus minus of 0 right now. So what that means is he's been on the ice for the same amount of goals that he's been on the ice for points for his team, if that makes sense. I think he's at like 56 or 57 points for himself, so he's been on the ice for 56 goals against. That's not good for one of your highest paid players. Devils, they need goaltending help. Vitek Vanacek has been good for them. Blackwood, they've pulled up Dawes and Schmidt from the Utica Comets, but they need a backup goalie or a starter, truly. Vanacek, is he going to be able to perform in the playoffs? You've never really seen him play. So they could be a team that could pull a trigger for like a Varlamov, possibly a Gibson, or a Demko of that matter. A goalie with term could help the Devils out right now and in the future. But if they're going to make a trade for 1 year, Varlamov. Dallas, backup goalie 100%. Same with the Devils. They need a backup goalie. Ottinger is great, but he can't do it himself. They need a backup goalie to help win some games in the regular season before playoffs get there. Tampa Bay, it's depth. They just need some depth help. They got a solid team. They've gone to the Cup 3 years in a row. They don't need to make much changes, but they could use some depth on that bottom 6 for forwards for sure. If they don't make a trade, they're making the playoffs, but are they going to be able to get past Boston? That's what they need to think. How are they going to get past Boston to get to the Eastern Conference Finals? Because in the situation right now, Boston, Toronto, and Tampa Bay, 2 of those teams aren't making the Eastern Conference Finals. That it's just impossible. You're going to have Tampa, Boston in the playoffs this year. So Tampa Bay's first got to think, how can they get past Toronto? And then how are they going to get past Boston? Toronto should have the same mentality. How are they going to be the team to beat Tampa Bay in the East? And then how are they going to beat Boston? And to me, that's what they should be looking for as well for the trade deadline. But majorly, Tampa Bay just needs the depth. They have a team that can perform in the playoffs, but they do need help on depth. Seattle, who no one saw coming to be in the playoffs right now, they're making the playoffs. But they do need backup for the goalie and depth goal scoring. They could be a team that can get a Varlamov. Their goaltending is done great, but their goaltending is shaky. They're not... It's hard to say with Seattle because they were such a surprise. Like, they shouldn't be doing what they're doing with this roster. It's just like with Vegas in their first inaugural couple seasons. Seattle took a year longer to be in this situation, but they could push for the playoffs. They could go to the conference finals. They're a strong team if they continue how they're scoring goals, but they also need a goalie to help out. Their goalies they have right now, if they got a goalie, they should look for a goalie that can start and not be the backup. And then depth goal scoring, 100% depth goal scoring for that team. You got Winnipeg. They need help on defense. They got decent goal scoring, but there feels like they're scoring 3, 4, 5 goals a game, but they're allowing 3, 4, 5 goals a game. Hellebuck is an amazing goalie. They don't need help there. They just need help, maybe a defensive defenseman or a guy like Ryan McDonagh, who's that fearsome defender who's not afraid to block a shot, to take the hit, to give the hit. And to me, McDonagh would be a great piece for Winnipeg. Rangers, D-help, and bottom 6. Our top 6 were scoring goals. Our kids are doing better than what they were at this point last year. But they do need help on the bottom 6. They have not a lot of assets to make a move, but they really need to find a move for that bottom 6. Otherwise, it's going to be an early playoff exit for them. Vegas, they need help with backup goalie. Logan Thompson's doing great. They really miss Robin Lehner for sure, but they need help in goal. Otherwise, it's going to be an early playoff exit for them as well. And to me, they could be a team where they could get a Varlamov. Or if they don't see Robin Lehner really coming back after everything he's going through with the injuries and with him having claimed bankruptcy this past week, they could probably go for a guy like Gibson or Demko. That could be a solid goalie for them in the future. Kings, they need help on defense. Shockingly, they're doing good with what they have, but they could use some help on defense. Maybe go for a backup goalie too, but their goaltending's been fine, but they really need help on defense. Edmonton, bottom 6, scoring. Their top 6 doing great, but the second, the third, and fourth lines get out there, they're not really scoring that extra goal that they need. They could use one more goal scorer. That'd be great for that bottom 6 to help them out. Maybe pick up a defender as well for depth, but for sure, bottom 6 goal scoring. Minnesota, they need help almost all over, but truly defense and goal scoring. Their defense has been shaky. Their goal scoring has been shaky. They truly need help there. Washington, all over. I'm surprised they're in the playoff position what they're at right now. But then again, the teams that have been beneath them have been even more shaker. Pittsburgh and Islanders to say. But for them, they need goaltending for sure. They need a better backup goalie. Darcy Kuemper has not been really good, and their backup goalie they have right now has not been good as a backup. So they could, preferably, they should go for a goalie that can start right now instead of Kuemper. He was great with Colorado last year, but they had an amazing defense. So now they need to figure out how to get Kuemper to that next level. But if they can't, they need a better goalie. Their scoring has been down this year. Ovi can't be doing it on his own. Backstrom, Kucherov, or not Kucherov, Kuznetsov. I can never pronounce his name. They can't do it all either. If they don't have that depth scoring, it's going to be an early exit in the playoffs for them. They're in a wild card spot right now. And the wild card spot that they'd be playing is Carolina. And with this team right now, they are not getting past Carolina. Colorado, this year they need help on defense and on the bottom 6. That bottom 6 and that defense is not the same that was last year. Last year, they were one of the better teams in the league when it came to the bottom 6 and defense. This year, they've been shaky. And the standings show it with them right now. They're the defending Stanley Cup champs. They should make the playoffs. But like I said before, it's going to be between them and Carolina or Calgary for one of the last playoff spots right now. And one of those teams isn't making the playoffs, and I think Calgary is not going to make it because Colorado should make the trades to get them to the playoffs, and Calgary is just going to miss the playoffs because of the moves Colorado makes. I think Colorado has a better chance of making the playoffs than Calgary. And the last team on the list, I said it before, Penguins need goaltending help. Tristan Jarry and Casey DeSmith have been shaky this entire season. Their scoring has been down as well, but it's Crosby and Malkin, two of the best players in the league. They're going to find a way to get the Penguins to the playoffs if they have the goaltending. You saw it last year in the playoffs against the Rangers in the first round. DeSmith went down, Jarry went down. They went to their third string goalie, Dominga, and the Rangers beat him in 7 games. And that's because their goaltending was completely down. Tristan Smith and Casey DeSmith and Tristan Jarry, they can't do it forever with Pittsburgh. They need to look towards the future, and they could really use a goalie like Gibson or Demko, or for 1 year for the playoffs, Varlamov. If they don't get at least a backup goalie or a better goalie to help them right now, they might actually get and miss the playoffs. This is where you can see a team like the Sabres squeeze in if Penguins continue to drop, or the Islanders. If the Penguins and Capitals both miss the playoffs because they didn't make the moves that necessary to push them better for the playoffs, you could finally see the tides changing for those two teams. They've been in the playoffs fighting each other year in, year out, but if they both miss the playoffs this year, it could be a wake-up call to both franchises. And with that, that is the end of my video. Again, this was my first video going on YouTube. Hopefully you guys enjoyed it. Please subscribe to my channel. I look forward to making more videos, and please share this as well with your friends. Just get this out there for me, please. And see you in the next video.